Good evening, everyone. Get set up a little bit here. I'm going to ask if you would join me in a moment of silence tonight, actually. Recently, it was confirmed that one of our students passed away. We just shared the notification with our school community about an hour ago. So I just wanted to reflect on Krishan Brooks, who's a student who did pass away. So if you would give me a moment. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I think I have a lot to talk about, but I want us to have an opportunity to have some not Lisa Veggie in the house. Okay, can I just pause? She should be up here with me. So you guys know Lisa Veggie. She said, Lisa Veggie, please raise your hand. So yesterday, I was at an event sponsored by Honesty for Ohio Education. Lisa is one of their key conveners and leaders in this work, and they have been a partner with us as we have sought to navigate the insanity of what's coming out of the Department of Education. We can talk about the state of Ohio too if we have time. Out of the Department of Education and how it is, actually the state of Ohio, it's actually Honesty for Ohio focuses on that. They've been really supportive in that work and really helping to get the information out in terms of what's happening in Columbus, how it's affecting schools, and what's at risk there. So yesterday, I was at an event with Lisa, and we were talking, I was able to share some of our experience in our district. I'll talk about that tonight. One of our students who has been a part of our advocacy was at that event. Also, Tom Jackson, State Board of Education, was there, in addition to Christina Collins, who is one of the founders of Honesty for Ohio Education. So I would say, if you haven't had Honesty for Ohio Education, that is a group that you probably would want at these events, because they're doing great work all over the state and are empowering districts like ours, helping us figure all this out. So Lisa, it's wonderful to see you. We're gonna have a great talk now. So I am from Ohio, and I'm from the Cleveland area. I grew up 12910 Griffin, right next to Shaker Square. I went to St. Adelbert Catholic. I went to Kirby pre-Cat, actually. It was wonderful. Then I went to St. Adelbert School on 8030 Quincy. Then I went to Hawken. Then I left Cleveland, and I did not think I was going to come back for a while. And I knew that I was going to come back around this time of my life, as I knew my family would need an active and agile daughter right there. And actually, the phone call I just had was my mother, telling me that her Android phone isn't working and all the things that she needs me to do, and to stop by tonight. So this is how I got here. So Lena Kirby, I am the daughter of two educators, Frank and Lena Kirby, both 40 plus years in CMSD. So I am an educator. I was always an educator. I love to play school. I still love to play school. I was with kindergartners today, and we were like drawing dogs and trying to connect it to a story. It's the best. This period that we are in right now, the public education, for me is unprecedented. Now, I'm sure that there are folks in the room who have seen madness that goes back to the 80s, the 70s, the 50s, etc. It's madness. And I guess I will start, if we just focus on the federal government, I want to come to the state, but if we just focus on the federal government and what they have been doing to school districts, I just went back into my email to check. It was on Valentine's Day, this past Valentine's Day, that every school district in the country received a Dear Colleague letter from the Department of Education. That letter indicated that school districts were expected to sign off on a certification indicating that they were going to follow the current administration's interpretation of a Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action. So a bit of rewriting of the law and the interpretation of the acting Assistant Secretary of Education. So I actually looked up and I was like, who is this? And I remember when I got the letter, I was so angry. And the first reason that I was angry was it is a busy time. And it's hard to teach, to lead, to support. Education takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. And it was just an unnecessary distraction. Really made me angry. Just for the time. The second thing that made me angry was I knew that underneath this request is a desire to make life challenging for public educators and to instill fear. So first, it's a distraction. Second, it's trying to make folks afraid. And third, terrible for students. So I will tell you that there was a lot of angst that school districts had when they received this communication. It was the decision to sign or not to sign. So some school districts felt like, I'm just gonna put my head down and just keep moving, who cares? And, of course we follow the law, right? But I knew, first of all, as an educator myself, as an educator in the Cleveland Heights University High School District, working for a Board of Education who has deep roots in our equity work, that this wasn't going to be, we weren't going to put our heads down and just go forward approach. And so had lots of conversation with our Board of Education. And if you know any members of the current board, you know where their hearts and spirits are. I'll just say this, we're known in Columbus, we go down there a lot. And our voice is often raised on a multitude of issues. So it was difficult though, because if you stick your neck out there, maybe your federal funding gets yanked. Or maybe down the line, other opportunities that may be coming from the federal government or for the state, those opportunities close off, right? There's a lot of gray in terms of what's going on, and I will tell you, educators like everybody else watches what's happening in other fields, watches repercussions that other people are facing and say, I don't want any of that, right? I think right now, folks in education are like, what is going on? We never thought that this would be something we would have to deal with, right? But here we are. And we do have a choice. And I am so happy that I work in a school district where our board members and our families and our teachers and our parents and our students really understand what our schools need to do and provide for our kids to have a strong, holistic public education. I'm so proud to work for a board that said, oh, first of all, Superintendent, we're taking this out of your hands. You're not signing anything. So our board decided we are going to pass a resolution that indicates that, first of all, yes, we follow Title VI. We're not going to follow your version of Title VI. We're going to follow Title VI because we always follow it. And we are directing our superintendent to not sign this, and instead the board president did, right? Huge brave act. I'll give you a bit of the story behind this, right? I skipped ahead to the punchline, but let me give you a backstory. So, get the letter. Like, what's that? What is going on? So, I start reaching out to colleagues. You read this? What's your interpretation? What do you think this means? Was able to talk to folks from Shaker and Columbus to say, this doesn't sound right. Are you guys reading this? They got with their boards of education, they got with their attorneys. And so we had a small but mighty collective of districts who took a very brave stand and said, no, We're not going to follow certification saying that your interpretation of Title VI, and Title VI, just to back up, is if Title VI speaks to not discriminating against people for, you know, race, gender, the protected classes. The current Department of Education, their interpretation is very different than its original intention. And so it's a trick bag, right? We were worried that if we signed that, then we actually were saying, you can interpret it, you can interpret this law however you want, and since you signed this, now you're held to our standard. So there was a risk actually in doing that. So working with the other school districts, you may have seen this in the news, so Columbus, Dayton, Shaker, some other districts across the state, but not a lot. 98% of school districts did sign the certification. Now, while this was happening, there were national lawsuits happening. So the ACLU in New Hampshire filed a lawsuit. The Center for Black Educator Development filed a lawsuit. The AFT filed a lawsuit. I believe the NEA also filed a lawsuit. And NAACP filed a lawsuit. So there are 3 lawsuits happening at the same time. So an injunction was issued where it was like down to the wire, districts did not have to sign it, right? It was a freeze. And then we recently found out, I believe, you know, in mid-August, that that requirement was deemed unlawful to ask districts to do that. So, a victory, we'll see if there's an appeal. I believe they have until like the 14th or the 18th. You have 60 days from, or maybe it's October. Probably October, for the federal government to appeal. Haven't heard if that's going to happen yet, but who knows. And so if that's the case, this could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. I think it's a silly fight to engage in, because there are other ways, and we're seeing other ways, if you want to attack districts and kind of force them to at least say they're going to follow a particular doctrine. I mean, signing certification, that is silly. I will say, though, that I think when we look at what happened with federal funding, that was like the next piece. I do see a connection. So, Dear Colleague letter was February 14th. We then got notification that all title funding was frozen for schools. So title funding is a significant chunk of a school's budget. For our district, it's about $7 million. Now remember the day it happened, our assistant treasurer, our federal funds coordinator was like literally running around like, oh my God, all the money is frozen, right? Like all of it, everything, Title I, II, everything. Money for our students with disabilities, money for teacher training, everything was frozen because the federal government wanted to review to make sure it was in alignment with, you know, statutory requirements. Whenever you get title funding, you have to sign off saying you're going to follow those requirements. So for them to want to stop and pause and look at it was odd because you sign off on it every year, saying that you're going to follow those things. Now, my hunch, you know, almost 30 years in education was, there's too many billionaires making a lot of money off that title money for it to be frozen for a long time. So I said, I don't think if they unfreeze it, it's going to be about the kids. It's going to be about the textbook companies, right? So for that first iteration, within a couple of weeks, it was unfrozen, right? But what does this do? Causes fear. Yeah, question?
This is a quick question. What is an example of building? Who would be a billionaire if I could make money off?
So those who own I don't know the names of the billionaires, but I know textbook companies, professional development, there's assessment, lots of money there. And those folks, they have their lobbyists, you know, and they know where the money comes from. So $7 million for us, but like think about a New York City or California, 50 million, 80 million, you're talking lots and lots of money. So my hunch was they're gonna unfreeze the money, because people, Yeah, and these ordinance, I mean, they donate to both parties. It's a game now. You know, you gotta be front. If you want your money flowing, you have lobbyists working both sides of the aisle. Got unfrozen. Then we get in the summer. This is a fun one. Here it comes again. Now we're gonna. So they didn't touch the Title I because Title I, big money. We're gonna now look at Title II, which is Teacher Professional Development. Title III and IV, and those are after-school programming and supports for students that are English learners, right? So now you see some of the kind of political ideology coming into this. You see some strategy in terms of, you know, who to target. And again, my thought is, it's not just about freezing the money, it's also kind of like freezing people's minds and making them afraid, right? So, again, nationwide, lots of advocacy, lots of people kind of reaching out, you know, campaigns to write legislators. In some instances, this did not happen for us. There were summer programs that had already started that had to stop because the funding got frozen and there wasn't money to pay the salaries. So, again, that money was unfrozen after the pressure, but we have already been notified that likely title funding is going to be reduced and there'll be a lot more scrutiny on its use. The thing about the title money I'm talking about now is it was already allocated. But when we get to the next allocation, we know, even when we look at least the House side of the government, they're trying to really slash education. So those things, of course, cause great uncertainty, great concern, and then it makes people very afraid to do anything that supports all students. So here's where we get to the attack on diversity, equity, and education. It would be nice if this was just if districts just had to deal with the federal side. But if you're in Ohio, you also have the state challenges coming. The Ohio that I'm in now is not the Ohio I left. So I graduated from high school in 1990. And when I first came back to the district, you know, I remember the board was sharing something about money and the report card and vouchers. I was like, what are you talking about? And I did not realize how student performance had been weaponized to take money literally out of the hands of students in traditional public schools to support the ever-growing voucher movement. It was like a brand new concept for me. And I remember for our district, there was just like because we were the first kind of like district that had the impact on vouchers in the state. So Cleveland Heights is like we are the first district. What now districts are dealing with, we've been in for 10, 15 years. So I wasn't accustomed to like state legislators being so, wanting to fight public schools, so it was odd to me. And I remember my first year, right before COVID, I was headed to Columbus to testify some funding issue, and I had to really get caught up, it was new. And when I went there to see the faces of the legislators across the state who should be supporting, I mean, they were just angry, hateful, not trusting. I mean, it was really something to see. I went, gosh, I'm trying to remember. There's so many things to go down to Columbus for. So I think this was about some kind of like funding issue. Later I went on attacks against censorship, you know, some of the censorship stuff that was coming out. And then most recently, I went with students And we have been, we were trying to advocate against some diversity, equity, and inclusion bills that have been circulating and are likely going to be coming this fall out of the state house. So I know I met someone from the class of 78, and I will tell you, and I know we have some parents of Heights students, I'm sure we have some alums here. You know, Heights folks have a certain ethos, I'll say that. And they stand up, they speak up, they advocate, they collaborate. And we had 4 students last spring, 9th graders, who went down to the State House and gave testimony against diversity, equity, and inclusion bills. Manuel Gutierrez, Calvin Bruce, Kennedy Brown, Jesse Bowling. These are 14 and 15-year-olds. You'd be so proud. What were they advocating against? Well, the State House wants to ban any training in diversity, equity, or inclusion in school districts. What does that mean? Not defined. Any offices or positions that have those terms in the titles, any consultants that do work in those areas, and anything that sounds like those words. So don't change the words and do the same word, right? The reality is, language of the bills is language that has been copied all across the country in red states. This is not new ideas coming from, it's cut and paste. And the students talked about why it was really important that educators in our schools are trained to support students who are different. So we had one student talk about what it was like to be a student who has anxiety, a student who has autism, a student who is Latino, a student who is a black male, student who is a young woman. They talked about students with disabilities, students that are gifted students. Training for diversity, equity, and education is essentially training for anything to support all kids. And, you know, the report card that schools, you know, still are measured on has metrics tied to race, gender, disability. So we can't really do any training to support the academic achievement of students. So when you make these arguments, because the folks who run the bill don't know it, nor do they really care, right? But for us, it was very important for students to tell their stories about why this is so important. I really wish they would just leave schools alone. I do. But, you know, politics is about impact and headlines and getting in line with the regime and showing that you're really great, whatever your affiliation is. And if it causes a lot of strife, confusion, heartache, fear, because at the end of it, it's not about kids. And we know that. It's not about kids. But I'm so proud of the work that our district, our schools, our students, our teachers are all doing in this space. There's more work to be done for sure. I appreciate it's great to be in this room because a lot of times you feel alone. And you feel like you're just trying to figure it out. You know, some people are like, I'm just trying to get to retirement. You know, I don't really want to have all this stress. You really do feel alone in it. And I was listening recently to a podcast. Ken Burns was being interviewed, and he talked about, you gotta remember a couple things, 3 things. Take care of yourself. Look for friends to support you, and know it's not gonna last forever, right? So I take that to heart. But one thing I do know that we have to be careful about is there will be vestiges and institutions and things that we're just going to have to address based on what's happened right now. Because I don't know what you do with the fear that I know people have. I appreciate from honesty for Ohio Education's lens that they are already thinking about how do we start building structures that we can aspire to get us back to where we need to get back to so we have a strong democracy. Because at the end, this is about a strong democracy. You gotta have strong public education, have a strong democracy. So I appreciate organizations that are not raising their voice, but also building towards the future, because you really do have to do both. So that's about 20 minutes. So yeah, that's who I am. That's my story. That's what we're doing. Happy to have conversation or questions around this piece, around this work. I don't know what the next thing is that's on the horizon, but really in Ohio, the state funding piece is the piece that really impacts us more directly in terms of what's happening, what we're able to offer to our students. So we continue to watch that, monitor that, advocate for that, and we know things do not change overnight. We just have to kind of keep doing that work in a very consistent and strategic way. So those are my opening comments.
Thank you. We have time for a few questions. If anyone would like to raise their hand. There's a question here.
For those of us that live in the University Heights Cleveland School District, could you maybe help us understand a little bit more about the, proposed bill, maybe it was passed, out of the State House that would affect property taxes and how we're able to decide on paying property taxes to fund schools?
Yeah, there's legislation that's still kind of bubbling. And there's a tax crisis in the state, for sure. The $1 billion in vouchers doesn't happen. That typically is not discussed, though, when we talk about the tax, because people are paying for private and parochial school vouchers. They're paying for them. So what we're seeing is, and this not only affects schools, this is also public services. So the bills that are out there now are seeking to limit the ability for schools and for libraries and for other public organizations to seek levies to support them. And there are other ways to reduce taxes, and there's actually a working group that's working on some strategies around that. There are other revenue sources that the state could pursue, but public schools are kind of easy to kind of beat up on. And they're trying to underfund them anyway, so that's why you kind of see that piece. Yeah, it's still pending. And it's confusing too. So there's lots of, I think there are at least 3 different things that are kind of out there that are being introduced. It will be very important to watch the State House and what happens with those pieces. And then even as you kind of hear kind of the different reporting coming out from different entities, to seek that knowledge yourself too as well. Because there definitely are political slants that you see to how those pieces are being covered. In our board meetings, we do something at the end of every board meeting called 3 Things, where our treasurer kind of explains what's happening as it relates to the recent legislation. She actually just did a quick session on the 3 bills that are out there at our most recent board meeting. Those are recorded and available, so you can go directly there to get the specific language most recent.
I'm just curious, is the only punishment for not following their interpretation of these rules the loss of funding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the threat, the loss of federal funding.
So if we, and it's a big if we had a way to fund our, I live in Cleveland Heights, if we had a way to fund our school system without the federal funding, we could actually choose to not follow those rules?
You would have, it kind of depends, because the state also has, funds that they provide too as well. There were, actually what happened, there were some districts that, said we don't really have a lot of federal funding, so this doesn't really impact us, so we can make a decision to follow it or to not follow it, But I mean, in theory, that is true. We, of course, want our federal funding because we want to limit as much as possible how often we do go to ask for levies. So we've been able to stretch out our levies probably the longest it's been, understanding that the tax burden is real. So that's why we rely on the federal government that continues to function as it previously was functioning, ensuring that we're following those federal rules without their own interpretation, making us say we're going to follow their interpretation.
Well, I don't have a good idea on how to do that, but if I get one, I'll let you know.
Anyone else?
Hi. I'm just wondering, because you had mentioned that the large majority, the percentage of school districts were not necessarily backing, sort of standing up to the letter about the Title I and so on. So is there any unity, like the School Boards Association? It seems like it has to be a unified fight from the public school districts to fight this stuff. I'm just wondering where that's at. Is the School Boards Association and the other statewide education associations, are they in on this, or are they?
I would think the union leadership supported, our stance. I know that. The School Boards Association, most people kind of try to play it in the middle. Because, they need funding and all that from kind of the same entities too. Even the fight around fair school funding, the Ohio School Board Association has, provided some support to districts around that, but they don't really take very public Columbus legislative stances. This is civil rights movement work. This is, I'm calling this person, let's talk about this. Literally, like superintendent's on the call, who's doing this, why are you doing it? And I felt, to be honest, and when we talk about the 98%, I really felt bad for some superintendents who in their hearts knew with this situation that they didn't want to sign it, but just felt like they couldn't risk the funding. They were afraid. They couldn't risk the funding to their kids. Now, me as a person, I will tell you, I told our attorneys, as soon as I got the letter, I ain't signing nothing. So let me be clear. Like, before I even talked to our board, I knew in my heart, I'm not. Nope. So, and my board was like, oh, absolutely not. So we're aligned, right? This is why I work and love working. We like to work at school district because we're about the real work, And it's not perfect, and we have work to do, but we also know what's right. So yeah, it really is, and to be honest, as we think through this age we're in, it's going to be indivisible every 2 weeks. It's going to be these meetings. It's going to be sharing information. Like, this is what it is. And then when we go back 20, 30, 40, this is what it was, and we're here. But I think people are shocked because they thought, well, I'm not going to have to do this in my lifetime. Right? I'm not, I have students who are afraid in the district because they speak Spanish, have limited English. I walked into a classroom and I saw a little girl and she was afraid because she didn't know who I was. Right? And they're worried. And so I had to, that is horrible. It's horrible. But we're going to have to build it back. Yeah.
Question?
I'm trying to get my arms around the big picture from the start. You're talking about federal funding.
Yeah.
And the threat to curtail federal funding in public school districts.
Yes.
And stepping back, we know that there's an administration in Washington, and they don't go out of their way to hide the fact that they deem to end the Department of Education.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, how closely linked and controlled is federal funding by the Department of Education? And if they deem and work every day to do away with the Department of Education, what is that going to do with federal funding? Who controls it and can authorize it?
My understanding is that it would move to a different department in the federal government, so the money would still be controlled by, one of two things. Money would still be controlled by the federal government, maybe through the budget office, and or go to the states to control, right? So in block grants, where you don't have money that is specifically designated to support particular types of students, but let the states decide. And the states are going to, that would be interesting. The federal government typically has played the role to ensure that we have equity and opportunity and resources for all students. Every state doesn't necessarily do that. Illinois is very different than Ohio. Illinois is very different than Ohio. So that's the intention there. I'll say one thing that I just have to say this because I just found this out. So you may have seen some recent America's Report Card, blah, 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 kids, da, 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 right? So we received some outreach saying that they wanted some of our schools to take the NAEP test, like one or two. So I was like, nope, not doing If you don't know, I say no to a lot of stuff and I fight back. So I was like, what is this? Beth, whoever the contact. So she explained, you were kind of randomly selected, and we want to give this test and it's in March. I was like, is there any information that teachers can use to help the students? Oh, no, it's not that. So you want me to take at least 2 hours out of kids' education to give them a test that doesn't count for anything? It's not going to help teachers? Yes, and I said, well, tell me, how can I get out of this? Just let me know. Please who do I need to talk to the Department of Education, as long as it exists, so we can't do this. Here, I shared this story because of this. When she told me how the NAEP works, kids are not going to pay attention to a test that counts for nothing in March when they're getting ready for the big test that schools typically pressure them to do well on. So I don't think any of the NAEP data is accurate because it is literally a test we make kids take for 2. So after hearing this is Nation Report Card, throw it in a toilet. It means nothing. It is unhelpful. And it doesn't really show. But I think what it does show is probably for the big districts who, they rely on those big headlines. They may pressure their kids to try to do well in the NAEP, but for the vast majority of other districts where it's 1 or 2 schools and who cares, it's not giving you any information. And I only say that because I was on a panel with Warren Morgan from CMSD, and someone challenged them on Cleveland's NAEP scores, right? And some people, this is a stupid test. Kids are never, especially post-COVID, kids are not paying attention to crazy stuff that you're asking to do in schools. They're not doing it. They're not taking it serious. It doesn't give us any information. So, sorry. You didn't ask for that. I had to say that. It has been on my heart. It has been on my heart.
Anyone else?
I'm going to ask you to maybe talk a little bit about honestly for higher education at the end before we conclude, because you have to know about this excellent organization.
So, I guess my question is, I feel very overwhelmed by all of this. Unfortunately, everything is overwhelming at this point in time. And so, unfortunately, both of my kids are graduated or about to graduate. So I've always kind of worked under the assumption that my school district was doing the best. And I'm not from Cleveland, but my school district was doing what was best for my kids. And now I'm like, oh my God, is it really, or what's going on? So I guess my question is, what is the best way to kind of, when you're coming into this with kind of blind, figuring out how you can do something or how you can help, or just, because right now my head is spinning.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even know which way to approach anything.
Yeah.
I really don't want to give a bag that's stapled shut and there's no exit.
Well, remember, it's spinning on purpose. because it's been designed to make you feel that way. So take comfort in that and then try to resist, right? Because everything that's happening is, let's make people feel crazy. So one act of resistance is to understand that and not do that. I think the second is you gotta take breaks. You really do. Because it can be like, oh, environment here. You know, like it's everything, right? So you have to take breaks. I also really encourage people to pay attention to their local elections. It was so important for us to have a strong school board, aligned with the community's ideals and backed by the community too as well. But hey, we have a cycle coming up. It's really important. And those are the elections that people tend to not necessarily pay attention to or know the votes. You know, it's different, but like the more local, the more impactful to the experience of students. And follow the state house. This is going to be my segue. Follow what's going on in the state. Call and email, because they do pay attention. They do. And it feels like, you're making it feel like it doesn't, and it's just me and my work. Follow the state house and reach out. I will tell you that when we went and did our testimony in Columbus with the students on the diversity bills, there were all kinds of people there from Cleveland Heights. We all came up together, like, can we just, like, we were all together. And I would the legislators were like, oh my God, here they come, right? Like, we're known, but that's a good thing. But follow that there, and that information that's coming out from different organizations and kind of sharing that, really, really important. I'm going to ask Lisa to talk about Honesty for Ohio Education, because they're doing great things, you know, in these spaces, and there are opportunities for folks to plug into it.
Well, I'll use my teacher voice. I use the microphone. I'm Lisa Behe. I am one of the co-founders of Honesty for Ohio Education. Full disclosure, Liz and I taught together in Chicago Public Schools, so we've known each other for a long time as CPS colleagues. And 4 years ago, the legislature in Columbus put forth an anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion bill and an anti-LGBTQ kids bill. And along with a handful of other awesome advocates and organizations like the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, and both our teachers associations, we bought 20 domain names, and one of them was Honesty for Ohio Education. And 4 years later, we're a coalition of individuals and over 80 organizations, everyone from a tiny anti-racism group in the suburbs of Columbus, to the National Council of Jewish Women, to the NAACP, several individual branches, to the LGBTQ Center, Kaleidoscope Youth Center, and we are all working to ensure, going back to the question, that when you are paralyzed about what you can do, that there is accurate, timely, and actionable information when it comes to providing excellent public education for kids in Ohio. So we have a coalition call once a week. We send an email once a week when the legislators are on recess, and twice a week when the legislature is in session. And the reason we send it twice a week, and Liz, you really alluded to this, is on Fridays, the legislative committees will let you know when there are hearings the following week. And in Ohio, what we've realized is that what used to be sort of like a week's notice and a super flexible schedule about getting to Columbus has become, we'll let you know on Friday at 4, and your testimony needs to be in by Monday at 4, because the committee meeting is Tuesday at 4. And it makes it hard for working people and for students to engage, for superintendents to engage, for citizens to engage. And we believe, as Liz alluded, and I think anyone who's involved in Indivisible knows, that our democracy is under attack. And attacking public schools, attacking the climate, attacking voting rights, attacking immigrants, those are all things that are pushing our democracy into a threat season. I'm so glad you talked about the word fear, and because fear paralyzes us. And so we try and send in this email and through our social media and in our coalition calls, and we have a group of boards, local board members that get together. We have a group of LGBTQ advocates that get together. We have a civil rights group that gets together. We have a librarian group that gets together. That there are actions that we need to take, because in the face of this harm, we should not be silent. And I often feel like the federal threat is looming, but the truth of the matter is losing our state funding is a way bigger deal to our educational budget than losing our federal funding would be. Not saying we don't need those federal dollars, we absolutely do. We also deserve the federal oversight that the federal Department of Education is supposed to provide. So that's honesty. Accurate, timely, and actionable information. What event can you go to? What action alert can you sign? What letter can you write? Oh, you want to write a letter? Here's a template. Oh, you want to write a longer letter? You want to come to Columbus and testify? Here's how you can get a ride, right? So we really provide a suite of tools and of toolkits. So I have in my bag always, I have a handful of stickers, but a bunch of bookmarks that have a QR code on the back. You can sign up for the mailing list, and then on Wednesdays, you'll get the email with actionable information, and you'll be able to join Honesty and take action. So thanks.
Can I say one more question? Here's a question.
I have a question for the young lady that grew, both of you, that just spoke.
Yeah.
And I understand, that folks are writing letters and they're calling and they're testifying and they're going down to the state, and offering testimonials, and still the legislature is just going right on and doing, hasn't stopped. So I guess my question is, what do we do in addition to that? I mean, I don't know, because I just don't know how effective what we are doing is, especially down in that state legislature. So, I mean, is there anything else that we might do? Or are we not unified enough, like you were saying, like our Board of Educations? I mean, I don't know how unified our Board of Educations across the state, or how unified are the superintendents across the state. I mean, I can think of some stuff that, that we shut it down, but I don't know. That's my question. So how effective are the actions that are being taken right now?
Well, I will say I was happy that we felt that they were going to try to sneak the diversity and equity and inclusion stuff into the budget bill, and they did not. And that's why our students went down with it, because I said they're going to try to, so let's, right? Now, there was so much going on with that budget bill, who knows how the sausage gets made at the last, but it wasn't there. Doesn't mean it's not coming back, but it wasn't there. The other thing is, thankfully, we did have organizations filing lawsuits for an injunction. So that was with the Title VI letter. That was a huge thing, actually. And so I think we can learn lessons from both of those things, but you are correct, there's more. A lot of this has to do with the gerrymander situation in Ohio. And, just personally, Superintendent hat off, my next personal interest is, how do I get involved in that? Because it is long term, it's going to take a while, but this is something I want to invest my time in, because I have felt the impact of that in the role in education. I'm like, oh, this is why it's important, right? So I think those kinds of things are really important, to get involved with organizations that are doing that work, to learn a lot about it, to see where you can volunteer and put your time and kind of assist and help with those pieces too. So I think there is hope in it, and it's not going to be forever. But the less that we get connected now, the longer it's going to be. So that would be my advice. I'm not sure if you would.
I'm just going to offer 3 other things. The first is to vote and help young people vote. And that's very much tied to my second thing, which is find the organizations if you yourself cannot do that. So I'm going to shout out the ACLU. If you, just like NPR is in the middle of a pledge drive right now, how many people gave an extra $10, right? Because we're getting lured and we want the I want my NPR t-shirt for right now, right? But the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, right? We are so lucky that we have amazing statewide and then local orgs doing this work. And then I really want to pay attention to organizations like Cleveland Votes, that's giving micro grants to organizations that are closer to the ground. I'm 60. I don't think I'm going to be that compelling to an 18-year-old trying to convince them to vote.
She's very compelling. I've seen her in front of a woman and grabs attention.
But there are organizations closer to that work, so I want to support those orgs that are doing that. So vote and get young people to vote. Support organizations that are doing that work and they're closer to the ground. And then the third thing I'm going to say is something that one of my mentors has reminded me, and it's very hard to do, and that is to stay vigilant. So for me to stay vigilant, I have to surround myself with other people who are in the work. So being at an Indivisible event, going to a democracy forum, having a text thread where I can check in with people, and then I have to balance mine with sleep, right? I'm either in 5th gear or asleep. I don't have a middle ground. But yours might be making art or sewing. It might be being with grandchildren. It might be having a faith life, right? So you have, these are days of vigilance. And when you see someone leaning back, you can check in on them to say, do you need rest or art or chicken noodle soup? And how can I help you stay in the game right now? Because these are not days of rest. And if I may, for a second, especially for white folks with power and privilege, our government is afraid of a multiracial democracy. And white folks have work to do in order to call in. It is our job to stay vigilant with our cousins and our aunt and our uncle to even though it feels like you are, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But to think, how will I call in those folks so I can rest assured that the folks who bring racism to my Thanksgiving table or who bring hate against queer kids to our trick-or-treating event know that I'm going to call them in and hold them accountable to hope and to love and to light, and that requires vigilance because it is very hard to stay in relationship with an uncle or a cousin who's in that space. And we can do hard things. So that would be my advice.
Thank you. You didn't realize we were having a special bonus speaker tonight. Thank you so much, Lisa. We have time for
You had the panel. Here's the panel.
We have time for one more question.